Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Susan Messino. I'm a professor at Trinity College, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the next speaker in the Restore Speaker Series. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Trinity College, Restore the North Woods, Walden Woods, the Olmsted Network, and the Collaborative Campaign to Protect Wildlands of Climate Action Now of Western Massachusetts. So I'm really honored to be here this evening and to be Restore's first official fellow. And if you're not familiar with the organization Restore the North Woods, I highly recommend that you check them out at restore.org and get on the email list. The executive director, Michael Kellett, sends out excellent information and that everyone should be aware of. I want to let everyone know that we're going to be leaving ample time for questions at the end of the presentation, and we have automatic closed captioning if you want to turn that on. We're recording this, we'll send it out to everyone, and without further ado, it is my real pleasure and honor to introduce Michael Kellett of Restore the North Woods. And he has been advocating for national parks, wilderness areas, wild and scenic rivers, and imperiled wildlife for decades. And he really advocated for what has now become Katahdin Woods and Waters. Originally was advocating for a Maine Woods National Park. And currently he is working on some legislation in Massachusetts to try and protect public lands as reserves. And he's visited more than 260 national park areas across the country. And so without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Michael to tell you a little bit more.
Hi, thanks, Susan. Thanks, everybody, for being on board here. Just a quick thing about why are we doing this series on national parks, past, present, and future. Um, Yellowstone National Park was created in 1872, and we've created a lot more of them over the years. Most people have been to a national park and like national parks, and so what's to talk about? What's the new thing to talk about? But the reality is most people don't know that much about the history of why national parks happen in the first place. They don't know that much about the challenges of creating them. And that right now, people may well have heard about the challenges of keeping them protected because there's more and more of a push to privatize or weaken national park protection. And especially with the new information we have about the importance of climate, of protecting the planet from climate change, of protecting biodiversity and wildlife, and having healthy green spaces for our people. National parks are more important than ever. So now is not the time for us to back off and say, "Oh, geez, there some people are complaining about national parks. In reality, national parks are ultra popular. There have been public opinion surveys over and over again that show that, in fact, national parks are the most popular federal agency nowadays. We're just above the post office. So um, but people need to know about parks or we can't defend them and support creating new parks, which is what we're talking about. So um, uh, I'm going to turn it over to Dina Charm, who's going to talk about, who's going to take it to the next step. She's been super helpful in pulling all this together, and she's going to introduce Laurence Cotton.
Thanks, Michael. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Restore Speaker Series titled National Past, Present, and Future. My name is Dina Chime. I'm a sophomore at Trinity College, majoring in economics, and we are thrilled to welcome public historian and film producer Laurence Cotton, who will offer a presentation titled Frederick Law Olmsted, the Natural Democracy of Parks. And Laurence Cotton and Ken Burns started out their careers together at Hampshire College, studied with the same film faculty and produced an early student film together. But as our guest speaker likes to tell it, Ken Burns majored in film, whereas Laurence majored in cultural anthropology and minored in film. And as they said, the rest is history. So,
Am I on?
yep,
Yeah,
you guys.
okay,
Yes,
fine.
welcome, Larry.
Okay, hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Hold on, let me get into some screen sharing, everyone. Bear with me a minute. Good to see everyone here. And great. Hi, everyone.
Got it.
Thanks for the introduction, Dina. It's truly affirming to know that there are so many people with us today who are clearly interested in the name Olmsted. As many of you know, there was a great deal of activity during the cycle of the Olmsted Bicentennial a couple of years ago. We called it Olmsted 200. Of course, Mr. Olmsted, we just celebrated, if you will, commemorated his 203rd birthday on April 26th. The Olmsted Network, formerly called the National Association for Olmsted Parks, led the charge, and many of us across North America joined in one capacity or another during that bicentennial period. It's truly an honor to present to an audience gathered online this evening. I want to extend many thanks to my thanks to all of those who've made it possible. We've already seen their organizational titles credited, but in particular, I want to offer my own personal thanks to Michael Kellett with Restore and my friend and compatriot on the Olmsted path, Susan Messino at Trinity College. And of course, Dina, thank you also for your logistical support. My plan is this: I will review Olmsted's life and career. Then we will explore the Olmsted legacy across North America, including Olmsted Sr. I'll also examine some of the works of the two sons, with a greater focus on Junior, maybe a little less so on John Charles this particular moment today, but I'll reference him too. I also have to remind you that when I feature Olmsted sites across the country, I'm simply touching on highlights. This is by no means a comprehensive survey, though I will try to do some justice to the weighty theme, the natural democracy of parks. Again, I'll just skim the surface of that topic. And at the end of the program, I'll highlight a few resources, in principal books, to call your attention to that do relate to today's topic. But first, allow me to reintroduce, if you will, to all of you, Frederick Law Olmsted. Here's a colorful description of the man by his friend, George Templeton Strong, a well-known public figure and diarist of the day. First, if I can get my slides to advance, that would be helpful. There we go. This is, again, from George Templeton Strong, describing the individual you see on your screen, Mr. Olmsted. He is an extraordinary fellow, talent and energy the most rare, absolute purity and disinterestedness, prominent defects and monomania for system and organization. He works like a dog all day, sits up nearly all night, doesn't go home to his family for 5 days together, works with steady, feverish intensity till 4 in the morning, sleeps on a sofa in his clothes, and breakfasts on strong coffee and pickles. Well, I don't know about all of you. I did breakfast on strong coffee at about 6 a.m. today, but I abstained from pickles for the moment. I might have them later tonight. Here is Frederick himself reminiscing on his boyhood. I was very active, imaginative, inventive, impulsive, enterprising, trustful, and heedless, a troublesome and mischievous boy. Later he wrote this: I was nominally the pupil of a topographical engineer, but really for the most part given over to a decently restrained vagabond life, generally pursued under the guise of an angler, a fowler, or a dabbler on the shallowest shores of the deep sea of the natural sciences. Well, that mischievous boy turned vagabond certainly eventually made something of his life. I hope you come away from today's program with a more enhanced feel for this man and what made him tick. Central Park, Brooklyn's Prospect Park, Boston's famed Emerald Necklace, the White City of the Chicago World's Fair, the park systems of Buffalo. Here is Delaware Park, part of that park system, and Louisville. Here's Cherokee Park, part of the Louisville system. Legacy Parks in Chicago. Here's Jackson Park in Chicago, the Japanese Garden specifically. Here is Belle Isle in Detroit, a state park now in practically adjacent to downtown Detroit, one of the largest protected islands of its kind in the Great Lakes. Here is the Olmsted Linear Park, Druid Hills in Atlanta. Here is the Biltmore Estate, the U.S. Capitol grounds, Riverside, Illinois, one of the first intentionally designed green garden suburbs in the United States. Mount Royal Park in Montreal, we cannot neglect this principal park site in Canada, although there are others. And how about the Niagara Falls State Reservation? Well, those are just a handful of the more celebrated, masterful landscapes designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. And if we add in the park designs and landscapes carried out by his two sons and the Olmsted Brothers firm, the imprint across the geography of North America is simply astounding, as represented by all those little green dots. 700 public parks and actually 6,000 commissions during the life of the Olmsted Brothers firm. I want to share a few items for media coverage in recent years. With an initial focus on the West Coast, I'd like to introduce West Coast themes when I'm principally speaking to Eastern audiences. I've lived on the West Coast. By the way, I'm speaking to you virtually, if you will, from the primo Olmsted Park of Portland, Oregon, Laurelhurst Park. It's designed by, or master planned, I might say, by John Charles Olmsted. It was actually carried out by the anointed first superintendent of the park system here. It's just a mile away from where I'm speaking to you right now, Laurelhurst Park. But I've lived on the West Coast for some time, but I was raised in New England. And I do frequently travel around the U.S. presenting the program. When east of the Mississippi, audiences there think they own Olmsted, particularly New Yorkers, and I dare say Bostonians and Buffalonians as well. But the Olmsted legacy does spread across the continent. On the opinion pages of the LA Times, the column Building a Livable Los Angeles, that was the title of the column, quote, in 1930, with LA's population on the verge of exploding, the sons of Frederick Law Olmsted were commissioned to draw up a master plan for the Los Angeles basin. The brothers came back with an intensive study of the ecology of the Los Angeles watershed, including plans for park space, flood control, traffic abatement, recreation, and the city's overall sustainable ecological development. The report was praised for its vision, clarity, and beauty, and it was immediately shelved. And if the Olmsted Brothers' 1930 plan with Bartholomew and Associates had only been acted upon by the city leaders of LA in the 1930s, modern LA would have a very different green look to it, I guarantee you. Perhaps some in our audience read this a few years ago in the New York Review of Books, an article titled America's Green Giant by scholar Martin Filler, including discussion of new volumes by and about Frederick Law Olmsted, including this one featured here. After initially calling attention to the acclaim that has been received by the High Line Linear Park along Manhattan's west side, scholar Filler writes this. Yet, however much the High Line has enriched the post-millennial megalopolis, its social effects pale in comparison to the revolutionary vision of the public park as promulgated by its greatest American exponent, the 19th century polymath, Frederick Law Olmsted. Perhaps some of you read this during the COVID winter of 2021. In the pages of the New York Times, a moving essay by Michiko Kakutani, who is, in fact, an avid birdwatcher. The heading was Finding Refuge in a Snowy Owl in Central Park. And this is but an extract, and here we'll have a nice wintertime image of Central Park while I share this with you. I'm reading from her essay. Central Park has long provided a refuge from the anxieties and stresses of daily life, perhaps never more so than during the coronavirus. New Yorkers who visited the park every day, as well as those who have long taken it for granted, felt a renewed love for this amazing rectangle of green in the heart of the big city. Its startlingly lush woodlands and rolling lawns, its meandering trails and wide open meadows, and of course, its astonishing wildlife, including owls. Here is the very snowy owl. Hawks, herons, and a dizzying array of other birds, who for generations have used Central Park as a vital rest stop in their migratory travels, knowing what many humans only came to fully appreciate during the uncertainties of the pandemic, that the park is a beautiful and essential sanctuary. And I sometimes catch myself right at this point and think that, gee, if I had been the copy editor or the supervising editor of the opinion pages of the New York Times, I would have bolded that one word, essential sanctuary. It's not an optional amenity. These parks are essential amenities. Amenity is not the right word, is it? Just to give you a sense of the path that brought me to this film project, it wasn't really quite referenced, but I originated and co-produced the 2014 PBS special Frederick Law Olmsted Designing America, which has broadcast across the country and has had repeats broadcast regionally and multiple screenings across the country. So there's a long story, but just to give you a sense of the path that brought me to the film project when I was young, I would visit the house of my maternal grandparents very near Boston's Franklin Park. As an adult, I would regularly walk along along Olmsted's Back Bay Fens and Fenway to visit the famous art museums of the area. I would jog around the Jamaica Pond and botanize and stroll around the Olmsted-designed Harvard Arnold Arboretum. As many of you know, all of those parks are integrated into Boston's famed Emerald Necklace, a crescent of Olmsted-designed parks and parkways that wind around a major portion of the city of Boston. I would eventually, of course, visit Central Park and eventually come across this, Prospect Park. And the first time I entered through Endale Arch, as you see here, and looked down the expanse of the long meadow in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, tears welled up in my eyes as I was simply overwhelmed by its sheer beauty and utter perfection. And this was decades before it occurred to me to develop and produce a film about Mr. Olmsted and his legacy. Perhaps some of you saw our film. There's the DVD cover. I learned very shortly after moving to Portland, Oregon, some 30 years ago, that the entire park system where I am here was master planned by the stepson, John Charles. And after completion of a prior film, I approached an old friend back in Massachusetts, Laurence Cotton, and we developed this film together, and it did air nationwide on PBS in 2014. So in the years since then, I've continued to dig into the Olmsted archives, meet with scholars and practitioners, explore additional Olmsted landscapes, as well as revisit some favorite locations. So allow me to summarize some of the salient content of the film, but also expand upon it a little and share some of my gleanings with you. His early years in brief. Frederick Law Olmsted's life began in 1822 as the first son of successful merchant John Olmsted of Hartford, Connecticut. As a youth, Olmsted roamed his native Connecticut landscape, as you see depicted in this picture here, initially in his father's saddle on rides through the New England countryside. All of the biographers and astute commentators tell us that it was that kind of early contemplative immersion into the rural country landscape that would have a lasting impact on the young man, as did his walks, his solitary rambles, and occasional long walks, as when he and his brother trekked from Hartford, downtown Hartford, to their aunt's house some 16 miles away, a walk that would actually take those two young boys 2 days of time. Young Frederick attended several boarding schools in Connecticut, but he had to abandon plans for college due to weak eyesight. He briefly worked for a New York City dry goods importing firm, but the young man was captured by the romance of life at sea, and in 1843 he set off for China as an apprentice seaman. Thus, Olmsted had his year before the mast, if you will, as a seaman sailing to China and back. Though the younger brother, John Hull Olmsted, did manage to matriculate at Yale, not Fred. However, he did spend a great deal of time in the company of other Yaleys. And here's a portrait of that group of men at Yale with his brother and chums. Olmsted's right in front. Here's his brother behind him. And Olmsted's right arm is around the shoulder of Charles Loring Brace, who became a prominent social reformer who influenced Olmsted's ideas and career. In 1846, Olmsted began to explore career, in fact, as a scientific farmer, a field that was on the rise. He apprenticed first at a model farm near Syracuse, New York, and then he farmed at Satcham's Head on the Connecticut shore. That didn't work out. Subsequently, he bought a larger property on Staten Island, Tosamook Farm, and there made some improvements there. Here's Olmsted's sketch of the farm below, and that's an early 20th century photograph, unless I'm mistaken, up above of Tosamook Farm. It's there that Olmsted made improvements. He started experimenting with drainage techniques, something that he became fascinated with and arguably specialized in early in his career. The property, by the way, is now was recently placed on the State Historic Register, and it's now known as the Olmsted Beale House. I don't yet have a picture here for you, but in 1850, Frederick traveled to Europe and the British Isles in the company of his brother, John Hull Olmsted. Also in 1850, he was hired by the New York Times to tour the South and file reports from the field. More about that in a little.